don't have the person in the front of the camera at all.
Here I am.
How are you?
Good.
Good. And how's Chris?
He's good. He's out for a walk right now, and I hope he doesn't come in the middle of the interview and make a lot of noise.
I'd be okay. I've had dogs barking, cats meowing, and all kind of birds flying around. So I've had a little bit of everything. So I don't think it'll be too onerous. How is he enjoying his retirement? Is he looking forward to?
Well, he keeps saying, well, I got one more week before I retire. So you know how that it's, let me just see if I can put this on so I can see both of us. Okay.
Good.
How are you?
Breathing. I'm still breathing, you know, I'm struggling, but I'm still breathing. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this chat with me. I'm going to ask you 2 simple questions, please. Will you please tell me your name and tell us a little bit about you so we can get to know you?
I'm Kate Bartlett. I am now retired, but I used to be on the faculty and was dean of Duke Law School. I grew up in rural Connecticut on a farm. I'm a farm girl. And lived in North Carolina for the last 40 years.
Wow. Do you like North Carolina?
I do, but we now spend half of the year in Maine, so that's also pretty cool.
Because you balance the humidity, so when it's really cold there, you come here, and when it's really hot here, you
go. You know, this summer, we've had 1 day of rain in the month that we've been here. So I understand you've had the heat and humidity, but also a good deal of rain, so that's nice.
Absolutely. You know, my husband says he has to cut the grass every other day because it grows like a foot, and then he's got to cut it. It rains and so forth. So I think that he's enjoying it, though. My husband is a gardener and a teacher by trade, you know, so he likes those 2 things. He just likes to complain about them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a gardener too up here. We have tons of flower gardens and vegetable gardens and whatnot. So, but it takes me about an hour or 2 to water every day if it doesn't rain.
Right. I can.
So rain is my friend.
Good. That's very good. Let me ask the first question. What was it or is it like being the dean of a law school like Duke University School of Law?
Well, that's a really hard one to answer. And for me, I was dean for 7.5 years. I would answer that question probably differently every year. When I first took the job, I wasn't expecting it, and it just seemed like an overwhelming amount of responsibility. What I liked about it, that I think this was pretty much true for the entire period, is that you set an agenda of things you can do and find the people that can make it happen. And you get an enormous sense of accomplishment. It's a different kind of accomplishment than when you're sitting at your desk writing law review articles or teaching students. It's a much more diverse set of tasks and goals. But it's enormously fulfilling to work with the team that you built to get things that you think are important done. So it's more kind of executive in its focus. And that was nice to do for a while. Really, really nice.
I think I can. No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things that people didn't think I would like very much was the fundraising aspect of it. But in fact, that was one of the most fulfilling features of the job, because you get to meet these great people who love the school, and they remind you every time you talk to them what mattered to them about the school and what matters in terms of the school going forward. So I found that, I'm an introvert.
Me too.
But I don't care that much to meet people the first time, but I like knowing them after I've come to know them and deepening relationships. And this job gives you a lot of opportunity for that.
Yes. I remember before President Broadhead retired, he told me, he said, you are the sum total of everyone you meet. And at first I really didn't understand that. But after I started breaking it apart, I realized that everybody leaves something on you or with you every time you encounter them, you know, whether it's positive or negative, but every single time. So I really appreciate that. I think I came in July of 2008, and that was your last year being the dean. Was that not correct? Was that correct? That's
correct. Yeah, I retired in 07.
In 07, okay. Yeah, because I do remember that you were not my dean, but by the time I got, I think you guys had just hired Dean David Levy, Dean Levy. to be the dean, and he started. And I think both of us started right around the exact same time. So,
That's right. There was a lot of turnover at that time.
absolutely. So let me ask you a question, and I really don't want to jump right into the hard stuff up front, but what did you think when you saw what happened to Mr. Floyd?
So it was I think a lot of people had a very visceral reaction because this was one of the more graphic, to hear about something is one thing, or to read about a horrific event is one thing, but to see it, and of course to see it over and over, you just think, how could this still be happening? How could this happen today? This looks like it must come out of the 1930s or the 1890s, or some other period. Again, knowing at some in your head that these things happen, and then just seeing it and being in it is just such a whole nother level of understanding. So mostly just disbelief, like just the idea that people would treat other people this way, to witness that, it's just to say it turns your stomach just doesn't do it forcefully enough. It just makes your whole body very painful.
And then 3 weeks later, we have a death in Atlanta. You think all the ruckus that's going on around us, people protesting, that wouldn't happen again, but 2 weeks later.
And then again. I mean, it's just like, it's almost like it's accelerating. Of course,
exactly.
We're hearing now, because it turns out to make really good news. We're hearing, now that the consciousness is raised, we're hearing about more of these incidents as they happen. But the idea that people would still in high alert, knowing that there are cameras all around the place and that they will get caught, how people could nonetheless continue to behave this way, is just unbelievable. I really just don't understand it.
And I can tell you, as a Black person, I have 2 children. I have a 41-year-old daughter and I have a 21-year-old son. And even for my own self, I grew up in rural South Carolina, a little town called Walterboro. And every summer I go to Richmond to spend with one of my other aunts, because my paternal aunt raised me. I was adopted. I've wondered, since I've been able to understand how we have such a systemic problem with race between Black and white and brown, white and Asian, white. Why do we have it? Because when I worked at Chapel Hill, my office was just under the coroner's office, and he was the state coroner for the state of North Carolina. And so he was a really, really nice man. And he would always invite me to come out to see the most grotesque things you could ever want to see. So he's got a dead body there, and he's doing whatever he's doing. And one of the things he told me, he said, "I want you to look very closely at this woman." And I looked at her. Most of her hair had evaporated. And he said, "Do you see anything unusual about it?" I said, "No, it's just a Black woman." He said, "No, this is a white woman who had been left out in the environment so long. Skin color does not matter." And I found that so earth-shaking to me. But for some reason, the color of our skin, width of our nose, the thickness of our lips mean that we are less than human to a lot of people. And the other part of that, and I can say about you and Chris, I can tell you're an introvert because you like to make your interactions very brief and then go on to do whatever it is you do. Whereas Chris, I've had several good conversations with him, and when my son was very, very sick, Chris was very, very kind to me. He would check on me and see how I'm doing and see how Everett's doing and all that stuff, because we thought he was going to die, but fortunately, he's almost back to normal now. So
that's good. That's good.
To worry about. But so,
well, you mentioned systemic before, and I just want to. I think it's important. I don't think that we know in any one individual instance of racial hatred. I don't know, just on the basis of one episode, we cannot call that systemic. So when we say systemic, I think we need to be really as careful as we can, although it's extremely difficult to articulate what that means. So, I think I think there are, you know, racial hatred works on an individual level as well. And the problem is a system that allows it to continue and to not stop it. So we can't be just outraged. So to say that we understand that there's systemic racism means we can't just be outraged at the individual behavior that of these police officers who committed these acts. We have to direct our concern and our reform instincts toward a system that somehow sends the message that this is within the zone of appropriate behavior. So I think that it's important to think about what that would mean in order for us to have this charge that a systemic racism means something about how we go forward. It's not an individual by individual matter, although some of that must occur even within a good system, but it's a question of how do we rearrange the blocks, how do we rearrange the institutions so that we are sending the right messages and so that we're apprehending the right conduct and putting up barriers to this sort of behavior.
Have you listened to any of the other chats on my channel?
I have not had a chance to do that, no.
I hope you will. The reason why I unequivocally say it's systemic is because unlike other groups who came to America seeking a better life, we were in Africa. And someone came, put us in the bottom of a boat and brought us here. And we became chattel. We became property. We were not people. Then we became 3/5 of a person so they could have voting privileges in Congress or wherever. And families were torn apart. Wives sold away from husbands, children sold away from mothers. You know, all of this has happened. So you think, okay, well, that's at 16, 19. Let's let that go. Then we get a little bit of Reconstruction, and then we get Jim Crow. And since that day, and I would say if you listen to these chats, even some of the Duke Law students will tell you that they have encountered so much racism in value, feeling valueless and voiceless and without power in order to survive Duke Law, not just in the world,
right,
but just to get an education. And so
right,
in my instance, why I think it's so systemic is my case example. Exactly. I've been in the same job for 12 years. And no one in Duke has seen the value of what I do at Duke or what I'm at.
I don't know about that.
I can almost guarantee you. I mean, you do, and some of the faculty do. I have some faculty who absolutely are just absolutely loving and darling to me as they possibly can be. But I mean, like my leadership, no time has ever said, you know, Rochelle deserves a raise or Rochelle's really done good work. I've been nominated, I think 2 or 3 times for the President's Award. And this last time in 2019 or 2020, I don't know what it was, but this very last time, 2 prestigious faculty, Ann Raskin, who was the former governor of the Federal Reserve in Maryland and was a deputy treasurer under Obama, and appeals judge Ann Barnes, all wrote letters saying what I had done and meant to them. And what I heard through the rumor mill, I don't know whether it was a fact, but people in the law school did not want me to have that award. When I came to Duke in 2009, you know, I really wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer. I really did. I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. And that was probably unrealistic for me to think because I'm terrified. I'm scared of everything. So I don't go out at night, you know, I don't like, so that was probably a stupid idea, but I really wanted to go. And, you know, Dean Levy sat me down and told me, you know, what it was like, law school was like, and, you know, and to go to night school while you're working a full-time job, it just wasn't possible. So I ended up not going to law school for a myriad of reasons. But the people that I work with every day see so little value in me that sometimes I feel like every day somebody's got their knee on my neck one way or the other.
Yeah.
That's why I say systemic for me. And I think if you listen to some of the Duke Law students, listen to some of the faculty, you'll hear that same thing from them about what it is to be a Black person at Duke, to be a Black person in America.
I hope you didn't understand me to mean that I don't think that there's systemic racism. I just think it's important for us to put on the table our understanding of what that means. So you're pointing out the patterns, the fact that we see it everywhere. Well, that's evidence that it's systemic. but it doesn't really, we need to even go further to figure out where, what's going on here that we can change. And there you pointed to the history, which is extremely important, because the fact of the matter is, slavery was a system from which white people profited very substantially. That's a system. That's the whole economic system.
Right.
So we start thinking about how the economic system is structured in order, if not to create racism, at least to sustain it in 2020.
Right.
And I'm one who thinks that neither sexism nor racism can be fully addressed without changing our economic system, because both of them depend upon white men being able to continue their power and options by paying women less, by giving African Americans the dirty work. But it's a question of being able to be on top. There needs to be a bottom.
Absolutely.
So to the extent that our economic system, this is systemic, their economic system depends upon certain characteristics where race and your race helps slot you into positions that create white privilege. That's the system. And so it just seems to me, when I say you need to be specific about the system, that's where we need to drill down. I'm not saying that I understand it perfectly, but I think that's it's not enough to see lots of cases of this. We have to put it together and figure out what would have to change for that pattern to dissolve.
Very good point. Excellent point. I get it. I see that. But let me ask you this. You've been at Duke now for a long time. Do you remember about maybe 4 or 5 years ago when there was a noose hung on the campus somewhere? I don't remember where it was, but there was a noose hung on campus.
Yeah, over by the Bryan Center. Yeah, right outside the Bryan Center where those kiosks used to be.
Yeah, and President Broadhead, Dean Ashby, and Sally Cornbooth called the town hall meeting. And I remember Liz and Guy and a few people, we were sitting not far from each other, were there, but mostly students were there. And an Asian woman stood up, an Asian student, stood up and she said, I don't have a community. There's no one here that looks like me. So when I have a problem, I have no place to turn. So where's my Asian counselor who understands my experience? And you'll find that many of the Black law students said the same thing, that they had to turn to each other to succeed and to pass law school because they were not feeling welcomed on the campus. And so I think that, your point is absolutely on point, but as narrowly as we can, we focus on what's happening to us. And I think we all do that as human beings. We think about us, not what's happening to others. I think the death of Mr. Floyd has brought more national attention to law enforcement officers killing Black people. But then you get the feed that all lives matter. And I don't think anyone has ever said all lives do not matter. All lives do matter. But right now, and I give this analogy a lot, the fire department comes racing down the street and it's one house on fire and all the rest of them are not, and they start spraying water on all the houses that are not on fire. That's how you.
That's good. I like that, Rochelle.
And that's how you separate Black Lives Matter from any other life that matters. All those houses in that neighborhood are very important, but this one is the one that's on fire. Let's put that one out first, So
the whole slogan "Black Lives Matter" presupposes that everybody knows that white lives matter.
Right.
That's not what needs to be brought to our attention.
Right. Exactly. And the other thing, I've been struggling with. I've been asked by so many white people, what should I do? And I say learn first. Learn what's happened. Learn our entire history, and not just Black Americans, Native Americans, Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans, Hispanics, and other Latinx groups. Learn the history and see how many instances of this, no matter how far back you go or how deep you go, you're going to find places where people that are not white or even considered white have had a hard time. I read an article from the Smithsonian not too long ago about people from Italy So certain parts of Italy, I guess the people were very dark, when they started, and they were treated like they were black, and so like it's almost something wrong with having black skin, like it's some kind of crime or something really terrible if you have black skin. And so I think that, like, in talking to you and talking to others, I find out that I'm looking through a very narrow portal, right? I'm just looking through what I'm seeing, right? So Mr. Floyd, young man who was killed in Atlanta, the 2 students that were tased in Atlanta, the 2 black men they found hanging somewhere in California. And I can tell you unequivocally, no black person would put a noose around their neck. They might take an overdose of pills, cut their wrists, shoot themselves, stab themselves, but they're not going to put a noose because it has such a powerful history for us that just could not happen. So,
the other thing that when I think about the noose, I want to go kind of in the opposite direction. I taught this, my favorite course actually that I've ever taught. I taught for 10 or 12 years. I started out teaching it with Carl Holloway, and then I taught it by myself for the last several years, was the Law and Literature course. And there's a seminar, and more than half of the students who are African Americans. And the whole purpose of the course was to read literature which exposed various aspects of oppression and difference, and it was a really good opportunity. It wasn't all kind of lynching or the George Floyd kind of. It wasn't that extreme.
Right.
We focused more on kind of everyday. And some of it very subtle, and some of it was not white and black. It was other sorts of ways in which we make difference a source of oppression and separation and alienation. And it was only open to 3rd-year students, and so they had already finished their years of it was the last semester, always a spring semester course. So it was a really interesting opportunity to just talk through books about not just what they had experienced in their lives, but what they were going to be facing in the future and how it is they were going to try to make a difference. So it was a pretty personal course. And throughout the course of the discussions, it depended on the year, kind of what things happened. But one of the things that often happened was that the students would find themselves stereotyping each other and assuming certain things. And this went both ways. People assuming that if you're white, you must be rich, or whatever. A lot of assumptions get made both ways. And so it was I love to, if I were to do any more research, I would get these students 10 years later to find out kind of whether that sort of close reading of literature with a mind toward why people oppress each other, why difference matters, and what happens when you try to resist the system. Why don't you resist the system? And why do you support a system that oppresses you? What happens when you do resist? All these kind of range of questions that help people get at really what their personal ethic is. I'd love to know whether these discussions in your last semester of law school could make a difference. Because these are the people who will be the leaders. They're the leaders of the next generation. It gives me hope that there's a self-selected group, but it gives me hope, that people are struggling with the kind of questions that we struggled with in that class.
I am hopeful with you, but I do not believe it. Like I told someone this morning, it's like trying to eat a whole elephant in one bite. The way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, and we've got so many pieces to attack.
Yep.
I have 3.
You gotta break it down. That's all you can do.
Absolutely.
And you always have to focus. I think the other thing that I try to get these students to do in the class is to turn a sort of a habit of blame into a habit of personal responsibility. So what ownership are you going to, black or white, whatever you are, what legal services job, corporate job, whatever it is, how are you going to live your life to make a difference of the things that you can see are wrong in the society.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 3 words to ask you, and I'm asking each one at a time. What do you think of reparations?
You know, that's my next book on the reading table is Sandy Darity's book on reparations. I need to know. I need to know more. I don't understand quite how it would work. I'm emotionally attached to the idea, but I couldn't be a sensible voter on the issue right now because I don't understand it well enough. So I'm going to have to hold that in reserve.
Can I ask you just one side question to that? Why do you think that victims of the Holocaust were repaid or reconciled after they came out of the Holocaust, not only by Germany, but America and several others have contributed to them? Why is reparations for Black people so hard to process?
You know, I think it has to do with how bad and how long. So the Holocaust was a time-limited event, atrocious, of course, but we can identify the people who were damaged and picking them out, and then that's done. And the harm of a history of slavery is reparations would only be symbolic,
right? Because
the harm is so extensive and so diffuse at this point. You know, not every African American has been affected by it in the same way, so it's just hard to know exactly how you would make that. I mean, I was always kind of attracted, even though it had nothing to do with race, with Andrew Yang's idea of giving everybody $2,000, or was it $1,000? I forget now. Everybody in a certain, you know, eligibility status.
Yeah. Okay, my second word is white privilege, or 2 words, I guess. Mm-hmm. How do you see that?
I see it as the assumption that the assumption by whites of being entitled to what they have. It's a rebuke of the notion that if I have succeeded, I earned it, and it's a counter narrative that no, you have been enormously helped by this very visible but invisibly empowering status that you have on the basis of the color of your skin.
And do you see it around you?
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
no, I mean just the surprise when you know, it manifests itself in lots of different ways. It manifests itself both in how whites think of themselves and how they think of things that they observe in other people. So they'll be surprised to see a highly competent African American person just you're not realizing that that's really their emotion or that's what's happening, but it's a very invisible, for how prevalent it is. It's not that, it's also very subtle.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to go back to reparations and what you said, you know, so there was a psychiatrist who did an article, I think it's at least been 10 or 15 years. He said that the harm of slavery had been imprinted on Black people's DNA the minute it got off that boat, and continues every day because we carry forward our past with us, you know. So we know, all of us know some member of our family was a slave. And one of the things that Jim Crow did so really well is, if you look at me, I'm a fair-skinned Black person. And what that did is it created a dissension between 2 groups, right? So dark-skinned Black people versus light-skinned Black people were adversaries, which seems insane to me.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so then you get to the place where, you know, I am almost always classified as an angry Black woman. I'm 61 years old. I'm not angry, but I'm just not taking a lot of crap anymore. You know, I've had enough.
61 is young though, Rochelle. I mean,
yeah, but 61 of my life has just been hell, and I just say I'm not open to the belittling and microaggressions and things that people say and do to me at work, out, my friends, anywhere. Like a woman I was talking to, she said, I've been in favor of giving everybody raises, even Black people. I said, you not realize what that word meant. I mean, that's microaggression, even Black people. Like, we were so low on the list that why would you consider giving us a raise?
Yeah.
So, there are those things like that, and I mean, if it is true what the psychologist wrote, that we do have PTSD, I could see how and why, because we've had no place to heal, no place to go, no one who has been there to help us. I don't remember who said this to me, but pull up our bootstraps. We've never even had boots, so how in the world do we have straps to pull them up? So I think that's different. So, okay, and my third word is this, and I want to try to be very gentle about this. Fear. So, fear of Black and brown people. Fear that we are inherently violent, that we are promiscuous, that we are jungle bunnies, and all of these other things that we are. How do you see that in context to where we are now?
So it's a really multi-layered question, and I have to give it some more thought. I mean, the fear shows up, I think, in many different ways. There's the fear that is represented, let's say, when a white person sees a Black person coming down and it's dark and they cross over to the other side. That's kind of fear of physical. But when we talked earlier about systemic racism, I think maybe the fear that we can't rely upon certain members of a certain race to be the bottom that we need in order to stay on top. That's another kind of fear. It's much more related to the economic system. So there's a fear that comes from, if white privilege is true, that means everything that you might call reparations, or everything that you might call redress of grievances, is going to be off my back. It's going to be
coming out of your pocket.
Yeah. So I mean, I hate to throw the economic in here again, but because I think there is some physical, a sense of, there's a set of stereotypes that feeds a physical fear as well. But I think in terms of explaining the system and why, and housing policy and child welfare policy and prison policy and all these things, really doesn't relate to that physical fear so much as it does just this sort of, maybe not just economic, but the psychological need to stay on top, to have a bottom so that there can be a top that I'm a part of. So that's and that doesn't, I mean, that's a very universal emotional pathology. It's present not just in the context of race, but in other matters where we feel it happens in our social relationships, or in our employer-employee relationships, where people don't want to give up ground, and they need to keep controlling. The whole phenomenon of people needing to control other people is a cousin of this kind of fear that I'm talking about. So I think there's probably a lot more dimensions of it even than that. But it's the emotional side of this. Tough to get your arms around when you're not a psychologist.
Yeah. So one last question. Have you ever been afraid or unsafe for your person? Whether a police officer pulled you over, whether you were in a relationship, and I don't mean relationship, but mean in the same space as a Black person or a brown person or something. Have you ever felt unsafe?
So unsafety related to race?
Unsafe, okay.
I'm not sure I understand the universe.
If a police officer pulled up behind you and his lights were going, were you ever afraid or thought anything bad would happen other than he would give you a ticket?
Not physically, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
So being in an elevator, you're by yourself, and a Black man walks into the elevator, and you all are going, let's say, past the second floor. You're going to go to third or fifth or sixth floor. Have you ever felt unsafe then?
So probably, you know, and I have to think, you know, not just because the person is of a different race, but I might feel fearful depending on the circumstances alone with anyone I didn't know. I don't think race, you know, I think it's too easy to just say no. So I want to leave a little bit of room. Again, the circumstances matter a lot, you know, what kind of, how late at night it is and all that. But I do think that of all the personal threats that you might mention, being alone with someone might be the closest that I would come, but certainly not, I mean, I think in terms of the point behind your question, I think certainly in terms of any engagement that I've had with authority, I understand my race to be a huge advantage.
I appreciate that.
Huge.
Right. We have about 4 minutes. I'm going to leave it to you to say whatever you need to say, you want us to share with us. Once this video is converted, I will upload it and send you a copy of it so you can review it and tell me if I can upload it to the channel.
Okay, how many interviews do you have?
Right now I'm probably at 55. And I have
oh my gosh, Rochelle, this is a real project. When did you start this?
June 8th.
So I think that's a lot of work in that pretty short period of time. So I think
I was so hurt. I was hurt and I was angry and I needed a way. And, you know, I'm a CNN junkie, you know, and so I see all these famous white, black, blue, green, brown people up there talking. And then there are people like me that's down here that still don't have a voice and no one speaks for me. And so I want to speak my voice and tell my story. And I want everybody else to tell their voice, speak their voice and tell their story, regardless of their race or gender or whatever it is. So that's why I started doing this.
Well, I have not prepared a closing for you, but I would say that what you're doing seems like an extremely important thing to be doing. That's what we need, more voices, more struggling, more education. Everyone, not members of one race or another. I mean, everyone needs to understand that and understand where we're coming from and where we could go. And that's the thing about this moment that just feels so different. In a way, I can't imagine you doing this series at any other time than now. You know, this really makes sense that you're doing this, and so it must be a lot of work on your part. So I really commend you. Not that I need to be evaluating this, but I'm very happy to be a part of it. I hope I haven't let you down, but I think that what you're doing is wonderful, and thank you for including me.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope you'll come back and talk again, because right now we just have this one pressing memory, this one pressing thing. Our house is on fire right now. But at some point, the protesters are going to go home. You know, COVID will finish ravaging the world as it has thus far. And so there's so many lenses to this. And as you said, so many layers, you know, and so I ask everybody, you know, come back and do it again, because you know, we will see something happen. You know, I'm not as optimistic as I could be, because I remember Selma, you know, so, you know, hoses and dogs and all that. And what we got was a Civil Rights Act, which really didn't give us very much until, you know, 20 or 30 years later, you know. So I'm hoping that if there is going to be change, it's going to be people like you and I conversing, you conversing with people that look like you and talking and finding out that we really need to do what you said, you know, have a plan, you know, tear apart the layers, look at the economic components of it, all of that, you know. But I would say that one thing, you know, so my husband said to me when I first did my first one, he was my first, I getting pigged with him. And he said, you know, Duke could fire you for this. And I said, why? He said, no. you haven't sought approval to do this. You know, and so I try to make sure I do them outside of my work hours. So I go in at 6 and I'm off normally at 2:30, which almost never happens. But he said, they can fire you. And I said, you know, for the first time in my life, I don't care. Whatever happens.
Retirement's good.
Yeah, retirement soon, you know, but whatever happens. I'm a true believer that God meters our steps, and whatever he meant for us is what we're going to get. So.
Well, have you interviewed the dean?
She barely speaks to me. She passed me in the hall and act like I'm invisible. I'll tell you a little quick story about her. So, you know who Governor Raskin is, right? She's the former Federal Reserve Governor in Maryland and the Deputy Secretary, Treasury Secretary under Obama. And she and her are extremely close. We talk almost every week. And so one day she had come for our morning breakfast, so we were walking back from Fuqua, and the dean was walking toward Fuqua, and she may have been walking toward her car or something, I don't know. And she did everything she could to get as far away from me as she could. So I became very intentional. I walked Sarah over to her, looked her dead in her eyes, and I said, Dean Abrams, this is Governor Sarah Raskin. And I told her who she was. And she said, oh, yes, I've been meaning to reach out to you and talk to you. She didn't even notice that I was there. Not even that I was there.
Well, ask her for an interview.
I'll ask her for an interview. I will.
Yeah, that's your.
Yep.
That's my suggestion.
Yep, and I'm gonna ask the president as well. Yeah, because I've written to him.
And Chris said he would do one as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Tell me anytime, early in the morning or later in the afternoon.
Really all right. He'll get in touch.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Rochelle.
Take care and be safe. Yes.
You too.
Bye.